Okay, guys, let's go to school. We can't stay here all night. All right, enough talk. Shut up. All right. Hi, everybody sit down. You sit down. Okay. We don't have a video program now. We can just leave text rolling, but we don't need it really. So, hi again. Welcome to City Gallery and the Behemoth Bookshop. We're going to kick off a very brief and not really massively focused debate, slightly focused debate on around the construct. I think Marcel was guilty of the name, art as infrastructure. We're going to see whether this works and computes. With us we have three white people, civilians. So this is Anna. She's a curator and she's okay. She's part of a band. She's a drummer, and they did a show that's opening tomorrow evening. I'm sorry. Depends when you. Yeah, never mind. Anna Davic is a nice person, and the show is quite nice. I've seen a part of it. I did, I swear. And we are all going there tomorrow anyway. So enough about that. There's Josie. She's making a newspaper called Mute, and you know Mute, and that's cool. And there's Tersha, my oldest friend in the house. We met 30 years ago. Amazing. Almost 40, yeah. That's crazy. Shit. He comes from Belgrade, and he's a philosopher. I think this is fair enough. And we're supposed to kick off with me sitting down. I'm a psychoanalytic and not a philosopher. You should get a microphone for that. I'll sit down, and I need to say that because you're not going to see me or me see you anymore because of this furniture that's so low to see you. All right. So let's try and kick this off. We didn't make any kind of deal who's first or second. That's a mistake. So, damn. So what do you say? Who should be? Yeah. Microphones. Use the power sticks. Yeah. So me, them, these people. Right. So let's see. Let's start. Is it okay if we start with you? Yeah, it looks like that. Brief, 2 tweets long, 1 minute and a half. Position statement from you, just so to put us on track. How about that? We need to press a button, I presume, saying on. That's on. Yeah, on.
So how shall we start? Maybe the first question would be what art has to do with it, with all that we heard before. So maybe a few introductory words on my own practice. I'm a member of a curatorial collective, What, How, and For Whom. So we do exhibitions, and we are based in Zagreb. We started to work in 1999, and since then, until nowadays, the framework of our collective work changed from informal friendship to running a gallery space. So we run gallery space in Zagreb. It is city-owned. It is called Gallery Nova. And we program it as a combination of exhibitions, but also educational program and various stuff. So to start with, maybe to explain those 3 questions from our title, what, how, and for whom. These are the 3 basic questions of every economic organization. And those questions were the title of our first show that took place in 2000. And at that time, we posed it in relation to the relationship between art and economy. And those 3 questions are a constant source of inspiration and also a motto of our work. And at the moment, we are trying to pose those 3 questions in relation to the status of art and the question of the way how art is distributed and represented. And maybe like the first response, also related to our project and public library is part of it, is that to say that we have to bring up the issue of usership that was also highly highlighted by 2 presentations we heard before. And in that sense, I would say that these examples are extraordinary in the sense how they go beyond this, what theorist Stephen Wright calls the Holy Trinity of the art world, of artistic presentation and exhibitional framework. And it consists of objecthood, spectatorship, and in that sense, it's really interesting how this notion of spectatorship is turned into usership, and it highlights the user value of art. And that would be like my first response.
All right, let's just move on.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Right.
For a place for me to come in. Yeah, so when I was thinking about this with very little notice, I apologize. The combination of the term artist or art and infrastructure struck me possibly as a bit of an oxymoron. I just say that provocatively. I think also there's kind of confusion in my head about is this artists' infrastructures or art as infrastructure? You know, this confusion I think is also really productive. I'll quickly explain why. So just to do a quick kind of revision of a bit of art history and aesthetic philosophy. So for Kant at the beginning of modernity, there's a distinction made, or he makes a distinction between artifact and art. So artifact is something that is, of course, subsumed by use, determined by use. And art is somehow able to elude this. So it can't be subsumed within this kind of horizon of use. Now, of course, we've come a long way from that. I'm not arguing from that perspective, but I just wanted to put that down on the table and then to think, you know, how within the era of mass production, we also have the Duchampian gesture of nomination. So we have mass production, the proliferation of infrastructures of industry, in a sense, relieving art of its useful role of representation. And within that moment of expansion into the world, at the same time, infrastructure becomes a legitimate object for art, which is an interesting kind of a dialectic of use and non-use that then precipitates this ability for art to call itself an infrastructure, or an infrastructure to be called an artwork. I'm thinking about just very quickly then how does an art nominated or an artist nominated infrastructure retain its art value, its artness? And I thought about John Latham in 1975. He's a British conceptual artist working under the aegis of the Artist Placement Group, and he went up to Scotland and was working with industry as an incidental person. I think that term, incidental person, can be important here. So his proposal was to nominate a landscape which had been used industrially for smelting oil out of shale, to nominate this landscape in artwork. So in a sense, I think that's really useful because it allows us to see how an infrastructure of industry can have a kind of art, the nomination or the frame of art laid over it, but it's something that I think that the gesture, the artistic gesture there, is operating a different set of. It's not continuous with the techniques, the operative logic that produced the shell heaps in the first place. So in this case with Latham, he comes to this idea through aerial photography, and I think that's a good metaphor. So it's like the artist as the aerial surveillance pilot flying over a landscape and saying, this landscape can be art. Sorry if I'm rattling on. So just quickly to kind of rush to the end. I think what I wanted to say primarily was the artist infrastructures, you know, we can see them, you know, we've had actually hundreds of years of artist infrastructures, or art as infrastructure. So anything from the Volkswede commune in North Germany that the abstract expressionists set up, or prior to that, I think, through to forms of artists' publications, such as the one that I work for, Mute, to the kinds of projects we've seen here tonight. I think what is key is that, in a certain way, the artists who are involved in these are, and particularly this is important within this art as an expanded field, seeing themselves as constituted, taking up this way in which we are constituted through infrastructure, and using techniques of art to prize infrastructure out of its immanent logic. Maybe I could say more about that. I think what is key here for me is to just quote Foucault quickly. The objective, if I could say there is an objective, is something about getting close to this thing that he advocates, which is become someone else. So, in a sense, you know, this is very rushed, but this is my response. Is, I think these infrastructures are about becoming, you know, resubjectification, becoming other people.
All right. My name is Branimir Stojanović, and I represent one project, one platform who started in Belgrade 2011. The name is, the project is Ignorant Schoolmaster and His Committee. This is the archive and library of texts, books, and essays of Yugoslav humanistic. And the physical space where we produce some kind of project of self-education for society. And this is, for society, means that we, in a process of self-education, put all social group who is excluded from society. For example, worker without fabric, veterans who is not recognized in Serbian society, students' movements, and other exclude from society. And this is my question for framework of this discussion. Art as infrastructure for what? This is the part who is hidden in this question. For me, the position of this festival naming this infrastructure the public. Public is infrastructure. For example, public library, public. For me, most important infrastructure now who we doesn't have in our is a society. Society is an infrastructure who we need. We know very well that 83, Margaret Thatcher claimed the statement, society doesn't exist. Now exists only individual. And we have to create through art as an infrastructure society. This is for me any good position to use infrastructure of art. This must be my position.
Okay, I like that way to kick off. I was trying to be silent about this stuff, because I know everything, you know. And yeah, I'm kidding. No, we had separate talks in these last, 2 days about this stuff. And the position of this festival is interesting here because, of course, it comes from the same set of minds. The whole idea to generate a public library as an infrastructure here in the shape of an art festival. And, on the other hand, to propose this little dialogue, all right? There's a cause here and an effect. we're noticing when we spoke with, don't touch the buttons, guys. Don't touch the buttons. When Marcel and I were spending nights doing, what's it called, bromance. It's like when brothers have a romance. It's not gay, it's just sweet. All right? When we were, it's gay. All right. When we were spending time together thinking of this thing, we were noticing that, many times throughout history, just like you said, there's been these, fishy guys, usually guys, sorry about that, bros, coming up with things that could be interpreted as infrastructures. And then we're noticing, look at that. This is exactly the wrong type of people you would expect infrastructure to come from. I would say, oh no, we got clever people, we got educated people. And then instead, it's the artists suggesting infrastructures for the whole society. This time, it's this remark that, with the transformation into information society, we are having, public interest and public sphere as casualties. And artists have to do something about public libraries, right? That was the thinking. But then, it turns out the artists are supposed, just the way we are creating meaning, we are supposed to create society. Did I get that right? Jesus Christ, this is becoming complex, What's the fee? Who will give me my medal for that? That's what I'd like to understand. Did you, Anna? Did you get anything out of this stuff? Did it sound logical to you, or it's just baloney?
No. I just wanted briefly to comment on what Branimir said about this crucial question: infrastructure for what? And I totally agree with it. But also, I would like to mention yet another layer in the whole problematics, and this layer has to do with the very basic question that art can be an infrastructure in a sense that it offers certain resources that are either wide open or it can be reappropriated and reused for various purposes, and those purposes are extradisciplinary, they go beyond various classifications. And sometimes this sense of infrastructure related to artistic agency, artistic production, is also connected with the very fact that art can obtain knowledge, art can also produce data, and not just produce them, but also to display them visually, that we experience them in a very unique way, in a sense that our perception can be changed. And in that sense, I would say that the question of infrastructure and art, it also has to do with this way of contributing to understanding the society as it is better, to be able to commit ourselves to this idea of changing it.
Do you feel like merry-go-round?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on this question of the shrinking of the state and where art kind of fits in, because I think, this has been a dilemma in many discussions, and definitely in the UK over the past few years, as the cuts fall and the public libraries are shut and the art schools are being charged for, and actually places like the ICA no longer have a proper programming budget. And so these institutions which are hollowed out are being filled with artists and art practices. And at the ICA, for example, just at the moment that they had their big funding crisis, which came through a process of total neoliberalization in which they even got rid of their membership model at this kind of art gallery cum club, as it had styled itself for years, and relied totally on venture capital and sponsorship. And then the crisis hit and the VC money dried up, and this kind of space which had been run into the ground and turned into a kind of extension of Arena magazine, as it was run by the former editor of the lifestyle magazine Arena, who then became the director, suddenly turned to artists and particularly very radical artistic groups, and many stepped forward to literally fill out this hollow program. And the question there was for people, why are they doing it? Why are they stepping into this hollow space? Why don't they set up their own institutions? Now, one of the debates there had been, don't be the avant-garde of, what was the term? Don't be something like, don't be the avant-garde of the crisis of reproduction, i.e. don't fight against, don't fight against what's left of the welfare state or what's left of these public institutions. But on the other hand, it's a very, it's a very nauseating kind of experience to be both, in a sense, defending the rump of the welfare state and at the same time being assimilated by, nevertheless, neoliberalized institutions which are kind of in the shell. And the final thing I wanted to say on that matter was that this is where I came to this sort of formulation of become someone else, because I think in a sense that you can take we can take a certain confidence from the possibility that so long as these practices are nevertheless operating in such a way that they resist the determining logics. I know this is something you brought up, Vuk, when we had lunch over the burrito, which is, you said, as soon as they...
I was only watching.
I'm holding that burrito against you.
Very important.
You said, if they become permanent, it's over. That bothered me a lot, because I kind of think you're right, but then I just finally to wrap that up, I think as long as they're in a dynamic state of becoming, then I think that in a sense, maybe it's not for us to have to decide about how we inhabit the shell of the welfare state, or are we becoming, fodder for the big society as it gets called in the UK, but to concentrate more on these core issues. Maybe that's very idealistic, but that's my thought.
But I'll remember this. You almost said I'm right. Nearly. Okay, thank you. But unfortunately, no banana. Okay.
I think the problem with the public is a screen for privatization. This is the totally now, in the time of crisis, very, very openly part of the very complicated process of privatization and merge share between state and the private capitalism without any social interest for everything. And this is the problem. A library ignorant schoolmaster is some kind of moderator to put worker, veterans, students in the position of public speech and thinking. We deeply believe that all people thinking and doesn't have any needs to representate here thinking or speaking. We don't have the place, physical place for production of thinking of people. And this is for our project the most important part. Last 3 years in Belgrade, all big international exhibition put our program in art scene, but I don't know why. This is for me very, very, very big secret. Why this kind of production of society, and we believe that with this operation, with mediated with the people who talk and think on the one side and make self-education, is not artistic production, is some kind of production of society. And society struggle, who is very important for all society. And now is a part of art scene. every last 3 years, big international exhibition put our project in the program. This is a secret for me, for example. Why?
Some people do this on purpose, you know, you can hide your things inside the art context. I think it's kind of clever as well, you know. You can make a political party as an art show, you know, slowly. Start there first and move to another gallery, a bigger one, and so on. Can you guys pass the microphone to the guy with a beard over there? He was waving with his hand significantly. That one. All right. Excellent. Just for fun, you see, as part of our efforts to make this conference as comfortable and coherent for our guests, we have organized a little bit of demonstrations around Slovenia exactly to display how this PPI, the public-private interest works together well. So for you who are in Ljubljana, we have a big thing on Friday at 4 in the afternoon. Please be sure to come to the big demonstration in the main square. Marcel, do you have a microphone? Yeah.
Here I am. Okay, so I have a friend who, whenever comes to these kind of setups, he always asks like, why no one mentioned capitalism? And that's like his last word. If no one mentioned capitalism, then he's like, I got you. Like you didn't do anything, or like you just failed. I don't like it, because usually I don't think he really like makes a point or something. But I will this time like mention that. So I think that what's interesting for me when thinking about the infrastructure is usually the scale. So many things just ends in infrastructure. So it starts with something which is like growing, and then at certain moment we can call it infrastructure because it got big enough. We can't really call very small things infrastructure. And I think that there is a very specific, especially from Sebastian and from these like examples, I think that when we come to certain scale, that the main thing which should be completely changed is the property and the definition and notion of property, and in that sense, a private property. So we can't really keep up with the private property at certain scale. And that then there is always, whenever that happens, there is always huge struggle. Because the ones who want to go for the privatization, they need they need a private property concept, because that's the only way how they can deal in capitalism. But when we deal with the infrastructures, it doesn't fit there. And that's what's interesting to me with that. So for me, like all of these art as infrastructure, so like a building a society, it's actually just trying to raise that issue by rethinking the property, the new kind of whatever property. So it's for sure it's not a private property, and maybe it's like Yugoslavia was doing. How do you call it? Societe. I never.
Societal.
So,
you should
yeah,
practice.
so because we say društveno vlasništvo. Sorry for you English guys. Yeah, societal. Yeah, huh? Social owner, yeah. Oh, whatever. I always felt that when I like translate it to English, it kind of fits into some other. So yeah, we need to come. I don't know the accent. Anyway, that's my point. I think that's the. And then when you say like, oh, the public is just screened for privatization or anything like that, I think that there is one quite clear. Criteria to actually recognize if that happens or not, how it deals with the private property. So if it really confronts it, if it really like what like Sebastian and Sean is doing, I think that because of that nature of the project, you can't really say that, oh, this will be assimilated or appropriated by capitalism soon. I mean, yes, probably. But I think that it asks for a very, very systematic change if it will appropriate that. Yeah, I will do a little bit of promotion. We will talk on Friday about that. It's called autonomous infrastructure. So I can see that there are capitalist entities like a Google, for example, Amazon, whatever. They can appropriate that. But there are very few actors in capitalism which can deal with that at the moment. So that's a little bit of schizophrenia, because of course that you can't be completely autonomous confronting that whatever idea and concept of private property, but at least you can be like a little bit like far away in questioning that. Yeah. So I'm sorry I didn't like ask, but my question would be then relation in between property and infrastructure, property and art.
It's a big question.
Yes.
Political economy of the universe. I would sum it up like that.
Yes, it's a big question, but also what Marcel just said, it can also be considered as a possible answer why the project you mentioned you've been working on, it is so often included in various art-related events like exhibitions. I think there's this huge need to also get outside of the idea of representational logic and out of the idea of private property. And very often such examples, I don't know, can be also captured by art, and we are opening up another chapter. But what Marcel just said, how does the notion of property relate to art? Of course, we need to raise the notion of authorship, because authorship, especially in artistic production, is also very much connected to this idea of artistic genius and of some kind of copyright and property. And in that sense, I think it's important also to be open to various forms that dismantle this idea of private property through art, and all those examples are all around us.
Sorry, just gathering my thoughts. There's a lot of things on the table. Yeah, I mean, I think this question of how... Sorry, just to get a clarification, Marcel, you're understanding infrastructure in a way that is somehow happening on a scale big enough to confront property. Is that part of your definition? Okay, I think I want to try and answer that, and Bernard as well. I mean, I disagree. I think property is internalized in the subject. I think identity, you know, the speech act, you know, I think the idea that we, you know, that I'm sitting here trying to make some kind of coherent sense relates to notions of property. I think property actually begins in a certain way in well, certainly the production of the individual and the splitting of the individual. And therefore, I think that, you know, when we talk about infrastructure, art as infrastructures, I think we can also think about poetic, semantic infrastructures. I was mentioning to Bernard before, you know, this idea of avant-garde literature where the syntax of a sentence is kind of fucked up, so that it doesn't hang together grammatically, and that sense that the meaning of that sentence will be completed in the mind of the reader, parataxis. That, to me, is an example of a kind of semantic infrastructural shift, if you want. I mean, I think I see these in a continuum. Maybe it is necessary to lay down some hard and fast rules, but if you just go with that, I think, yeah, in a sense, to find, I mean, well, then trying to link to the question of why education, why self-education, why has that become interesting to art? Why has that been brought in? And of course, it's part of this, you know, end of representation, the representational function of art. Art opens to the world, and within that doing, or doing so, then, in a sense, it's the models through which you know, the social is produced that becomes of interest to art and becomes also shared, like, so the practices of self-education, or the contestation of education as a form of, you know, producing the subject, producing the thought, the thinking subject, producing the property-owning subject. All of this I think they start to come together. And I'm not saying it's not problematic, because I think it can, this educational turn can become, right, almost like a kind of education as performance act to be voyeuristically consumed, and this is a problem, but I don't think that education entering into art is necessarily, well, I mean, that's how I understand it anyway.
Okay, Marcel, your question is what is the connection with between art and property? No. Yes. Art is a part of very, very capitalistic way of between ugovor, kako se kaže? Contract and artist is contractor. This is very, very, very simple. This kind of transgression of intellectual property, for example, we have to very good, is some kind of very interested, but transgression of in capitalism is not a problem for capitalism. Capitalism is transgression in himself. And in 43, Yugoslav communists invite one form of property, which is social property, and this is social. This is not good in English translation, but I don't know better. But the property of social property doesn't have subject without inside. This is the property for all member of society without any titular, kako se kaže, without the subject. And the problem of property in capitalistic is that this kind of subjectification in property is a subject of so-called civil society. This is the problem. This kind of subjectivization in private property is a hollow phrase in the social file. And this kind of social ownership or social property have totally other possibility, and Yugoslav self-management system is not a good example for operationalization of this kind of possibility, who give this kind of social property. And project Ignora's schoolmaster and his committee make the last year very, very large investigation about this concept, and this is our position, that we think that exists in conceptual way total other possibility for property.
Okay, I think we have Oliver there, right? The man with the microphone. Yeah, there's one more somewhere there. There's one more over there.
Okay. Actually, it's two parts and maybe an attempt, because it's not a position, but really a question, but one trying to complicate maybe the topic a little along hopefully interesting lines. But
thank you very much, man.
One, please. We don't even know each other, but we already understand each other. That's great. No, but the one is actually plurality, I would say, and as a shorthand, and the other is novelty. Because on the one hand, I thought, I mean, these rounds are always interesting because you have people from different contexts coming together who are kind of in critical practices involved, and it's mostly an exchange. But then when you talk conceptually, it always gets kind of this universal talk about defining topics and concepts, and very conceptual. And I was wondering, because I have this problem with art as a concept. I'm part of a university which just made up a new research unit called Art and Civic Media, and actually I can't deal with it because I don't know what art should be. And I'm wondering, the same goes for infrastructure. I'm wondering what you would say to the question of breaking down these big concepts of art and infrastructure, because I think I understand why we talk about it, because there is a pre-mediated context we are in. We are kind of dealing with the field of art, which is, like what you said, this kind of field of commercial creativity and all the strategies of property involved and all of that. And we are part of one infrastructure, which is globalized capitalism. But then I think to think anew about these things, we should also think about the plurality of those concepts. And I'm thinking very concretely of discussions I had with people like in Latin America just recently, who kind of go very differently about the notion of the struggle of power. And I think the comment of Marcel led to one idea which makes it plausible to talk in the singular, because then you always have like the enemy in focus. It's like the one big struggle for power and control of society, or of defining what are the vital infrastructures, who's owning them, how can you use them. But on the other hand, there are very different ways to go about this. And in Latin America, they don't want to attack Google directly. They say we go into the Amazon and we build our own infrastructures. We don't care what those guys are doing up there in the US in a way. And it's more complicated than that, but I think this question of plurality is kind of productive to not have these kind of salon discussions about universal concepts, but bring in different experiences and strategies as well. The second one is novelty, because I thought, very interesting point, I think it goes also like against these universal understandings of these notions, because they change in time, like capitalism changes in time. And I thought a very kind of productive way to go about the question, why are we discussing this now in the context, and what are kind of the new problematics and the struggles we are facing. I thought it very useful, this kind of proposal to say, one thing we actually are confronted with is this transformation, and capitalism is confronted with actually as well, is the transformation of the spectator into the user. Because that's actually how I understood what Sebastian was presenting. That's kind of an art piece of exhibiting, like making this very paradoxical, like saying, actually, I'm presenting something which is geared in the language of spectatorship, like I'm looking at an image, and it's an image, it's not appropriated text and kind of theft of intellectual property, but at the same time it empowers the user to become a real user of those infrastructures in a paradoxical way and regenerate something which was property. And I think these lines are kind of very productive to think along, because I would say the art kind of practices I'm interested in are actually moving away from spectatorship and are going into this do-it-yourself appropriation of knowledge, infrastructures, and it's like, I think Jeremy said, like, it's not about manifestos, but about how-tos. And I think, like, the Occupy movement was a very good presentation of that it's about how-tos and about new practices of creating and appropriating infrastructures. And I'm wondering kind of what progressive art positions have to say about that and how they would adjust to that.
Actually, myself, I think it's not about how-tos, it's about why-tos. It's not the know-how, it's the know-why that's lacking in this picture. But yes, you're right, you did make it more complicated than it already was. Before we go on the last round, because we have to vacate this space eventually, I'd like to pass the microphone over there, right? You were waving, and then we'll try and wrap this.
Okay, yeah. So I found it strange because we're talking about infrastructure, art and infrastructure, but nobody's mentioned superstructure. And in classical kind of Marxist thought, art would be positioned as superstructure, right? And then with kind of deconstructionist thought and constructivist thought, which I think with art has been very strongly affected by. That relationship has been massively problematized, but I think kind of that problematization has still got problems in it, right? And because, let's say, for example, with the Derridean or Deleuzian kind of understanding of art, art is allowed to kind of have this we understand it as this proliferation of differences, but capital can subsume all of these differences. So the question then becomes, what can art do that instead of just being this kind of proliferation of difference that capital can just take up the slack of, right? And that for me is why art has got to become infrastructure, and that kind of the relationship has got to be completely changed, and we have to completely reconceive this kind of and not just to kind of make the superstructure and the infrastructure kind of in a kind of this shuttling relationship of difference, but something completely different. And for me, these projects like arg.org and so on are really doing that. And so I wondered what you think about that.
You feel happy discussing any of these additions? You feel unhappy?
Well, I would just quickly say that, by and large, I agree with you. I think that, where I started provocatively with this kind of distinction between the artifact and the artwork, in a way just to underline how far we have come from that, and how, use doesn't necessarily position itself antithetically to art any longer, or, if that's expressed badly, I apologize. But I think that, art and infrastructure, say, or technique or techniques are in a flattened relationship. But I think that somehow within that is this quest for freedom. And I think maybe, in a sense, if autonomy, the autonomy of the artwork has kind of come down to earth, I think what you see in its relationship as it approaches these and builds these systems is the bid for, some kind of, if it's just a bit of wiggle room, or if it's an exit, or if it's an exodus, it's a line of flight out of a current entrapping set of relations and techniques. And I don't really know how those should be allocated. Like, should that be called society? Should that be called, self-instituting groupuscules? Should that be called communism? Should that be called art? But I think freedom is essential in the discussion.
And also solidarity. Yes, I would rather avoid being prescriptive in what art should be and what will be the future of artistic field. But I can mention one possible scenario, and we are actually also witnessing it in last decade. We witness this moment that art very often distances itself from the art. So, in that sense, on the larger scale, we also witness various escapist and exit strategies out from the art field. And in that sense, maybe we should also tune our perception to such strategies, and maybe to feel, maybe to think of the place of art also as something that is influenced by questioning ourselves. Why do we still need art? And what do we expect from it? And what do we promise in return?
My first question is art as infrastructure for what? Now I want to make other question. Art as infrastructure for who? I think we have the struggle between two different in a same space concept. One is in the struggle between society and civil society. For me now is crucial, and for me I have experience in Belgrade, Serbia, with the role of art and all art in 19th and in 2000 in the totally in the function of operation of privatization and ideology of privatization on the large and I don't believe that art is not part of struggle between society and civil society, and I think art must choose the position. This is my opinion.
All right, I'll wrap this up now. I'm sure you all now have an absolutely perfect idea, and we have filled the question of art as infrastructure with lots of meaning for everybody. There's extra inflation of meaning here. Don't laugh, it's serious. I want to thank the sponsors from Microsoft Corporation. This is horrible. Move the fucking mouth. Look, that's it for now. We didn't really plan your life for the rest of the evening, so, you know, keep living on your own. The festival does go on tomorrow morning. The Gutenberg printing guy is kicking it off around noon, and then we go on with films and all kinds of crazy shit, but you will see. So, you know, thank you guys for being patient with these people here and the other way around. And see you later.